2 days after his 19th birthday. I woke up and I heard a gurgling noise upstairs in my bedroom. Did not sound like a normal noise, and I walked up and found him seconds away from death. Like, his organs were shutting down. He was in a seizure state. I mean, it really was as close to a corpse as you could imagine. I could not even open his mouth to do CPR.
All right, welcome back, viewers, watchers, listeners. I'm your host, Tyler Owen. Got a co-host today, Joey Sepulveda from the San Antonio Hill Country area. Man, I appreciate you jumping in.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
What's
coming back over here.
Yeah, what's going on in your area?
Wow. Well, what can I tell you? Last night, prayers go out to 7 SAPD officers that were injured in an active shooting call yesterday. But hopefully they all come out of it. And but yeah, that's what's going on there. Also dealing still with the politics of the big city, metropolitan city of Balcony Heights.
Yeah, Balcony Heights, yes.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, still dealing with a tyrant mayor, but nevertheless.
Well, it is what it is. But for those that don't know, we're recording this on Thursday, the 24th. Sounds good? Yeah.
Sounds good.
Last night, San Antonio responded to a call of a suicidal subject, and ultimately 7 officers were shot in San Antonio. None of them are listed as critical, but our thoughts and prayers go out to San Antonio PD for a speedy recovery. So just another testament to the ongoing war against cops, and quite honestly, enough's enough. So
absolutely.
Anyway, got some guests on today, one from Hays County and another one heavily involved with the fentanyl crisis. And this is going to be a good episode. I think the contrast of how a tragedy can turn into how someone can take a tragedy and turn it into something positive, which is hard to do for those that have ever lost a loved one. But my hats off go to you. Well, Joey, why don't you introduce our guest, and I'll introduce mine.
Okay. This is Stefanie Roe. She is the founder of the Tucker Project, and it's, help me out there, it's Texas Against Fentanyl?
Yes, in Texas Against Fentanyl. Yep, they're both 501c3s.
So, she's here. She's going to give us a little bit of her story. And
which is phenomenal.
Yes, and also, too, what she has been doing lately for everybody, all the law enforcement officers in the state of Texas, to help combat this evil.
And speaking of law enforcement, we have a representative from Hays County Sheriff's Office, Mark Andrews. Welcome to Blue Grit, man.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
So speaking of fentanyl, y'all obviously popped up. Me being recently moving to Hays County, now I'm a resident of Hays County. I'm kind of aware of y'all's involvement, y'all's phenomenal outreach that you guys do for the youth there about fentanyl. And to my knowledge, I don't remember being in East Texas that there was a lot of law enforcement officers that or law enforcement agencies that did that. And so I wanted you guys to kind of come on and discuss kind of what y'all's involvement has been up until this point. And then her story is going to be Joey called me one day. I was coming home from traveling somewhere, and he said, man, I got to get this girl on the podcast. And I was like, he started telling me about it, and I was like, oh, my gosh. So, but yeah, I think we should start off kind of how we got here. Where'd you grow up? Talk about your son, Tucker, and then talk about the events that happened, and then talk about kind of where we are today.
Okay. Well, I'm Stefanie Roe, and I'm originally from Michigan. I moved to Texas in 2009 with my family. I was a mom of 4 kids. My oldest was Tucker, my firstborn and only son, and I have 3 daughters. So I was doing life here, and I guess I would say ever since I was a little girl, I always just wanted to be a mom. That was my biggest mission in life, was just wanting to be a mom. And I was the mom who read the books and did the groups and homeschooled the kids and did everything I could to keep my kids safe and raise them in a loving home and a community with family and friends around. And in 2021, my 18-year-old son, Tucker, was offered a pill at a New Year's Eve party. And if you think back in 2021, we had just came out of COVID. We were getting life back to normal, and I had never heard of illicit fentanyl. I would say that I'm a young mom. I was aware of drugs. I understand that. I understand people experimenting with drugs. I knew about cocaine and heroin, ecstasy, that's typical drugs that we all grew up learning about or people experimenting with. And I thought you were going
to. No, go ahead.
And so when he came home from that New Year's Eve party, he told me about a pill that he was given at the party. And I said, what was it? And he told me it was Xanax. During that time, he had a broken hand, so he was off work. And unbeknownst to me, he continued to get Xanax from a peer on social media, and those were fentanyl-laced pills. And the other component behind it that I didn't understand is social media. And, I grew up on payphones and pagers. So during that time, we're just hitting that generation of parents who did not have social media.
Yeah, MySpace was probably the first kickoff.
Yep, MySpace, yep.
Absolutely.
Looking at it now, it's changed significantly.
In fast, and it continues to change. And so we're kind of, all of us in this age group, we're on the front lines of this, where now we're having to raise children in a generation that we know nothing about. And like, we can't relate to them, and they're having to figure it out. And they're having access to things faster than we even understand. And then you talk about apps, and, Snapchat kind of came when Tucker was in middle school. That was kind of coming. And really watching my kids' progression as the years change, and just the evolving. My youngest now is 10. So I've been a mom for 23 years, and I've watched a lot of it. 12 years difference between my first and last. And it's definitely changing. But with Tucker's story, for 10 weeks, he's taking highly addictive pills that I have no knowledge of. And
could you tell that something was off?
Yeah, I noticed a change in his behavior. And, it's that season as a kid is coming out of high school. Like, everyone asks, what are you going to do when you grow up? And he's trying to figure out, what do I want to do? His friends are off at college. His dad owned a construction company, so he's working there, but really just trying to find himself. And I noticed a change, I would say, like depression, being recluse, like sleeping more, being more moody. We talked about it, like, what's going on. I was like, are you smoking marijuana? I was worried about him smoking dab, because I'm like, what is going on? Like, I'm trying to figure this out. And he's like, no, like, I'm just, I'm taking some Xanax. And I remember one time he came to my house and he was really sleepy. I made him breakfast and was like, go to bed. Like, you need to get some rest. Really, he could have went to bed and died that day. I did not have any knowledge of it. So many warning signs I missed. And really, a warning sign for a parent, I would say, is a change in behavior. Sometimes people say their kids start behaving. They start going to bed at a decent time. And the thing with fentanyl that we have to understand is it doesn't impact people like other drugs. It's not like, oh, they're drinking and acting silly. They take something, they go to sleep. This isn't like a party social drug. This is a downer, something that people are doing. And, now knowing what I know, they're not looking for fentanyl. They are maybe using something that has fentanyl in it before they even know the impact that it has on the body. And unlike any other drugs, fentanyl, the impact on if you look at, it's not just a brain response, it's a body response. So if someone has been regularly using and they're in withdrawals, their body is hurting. They're in flu-like symptoms, restless legs, sweating, diarrhea, vomiting, the impact of the brain, which is where if we're looking at why people use. Well, they don't usually start looking for fentanyl. People don't start like that. But people, think about, why do people drink alcohol? Why do people, have sex? Why do people do anything? It's a chemical response in the brain. And fentanyl is so strong, it impacts the brain in such a way that I didn't know any of this going into it. Didn't understand it impacts all the opioid receptors throughout our whole body, that it causes this mass amount of dopamine to flood into the brain, that it changes the chemical makeup of a brain. And if you're looking at an adolescent brain, that doesn't develop before the ages of 25. So you have a prefrontal cortex, that's our ability to make decisions, that's not fully developed until they're age 25. Kids are going to make decisions, and we're supposed to learn from our mistakes. And we all have made mistakes, and we grow up and talk about it and talk about the crazy things we did as a kid that we would never do as an adult.
Talk about you mentioned he was on Xanax. Was that just because as a parent and as a cop, you want to have that trust with your kids, and I think it's Mark, you can chime in whenever you want to. You want to be the blanket of security for your kids, and you want them to be open. Yeah. Did y'all have that relationship where he was like, yeah, I'm doing this, I know it's wrong, but, and then you just kind of trusted his instinct? Is that what happened?
Tucker and I have always been really close, and I'll say that I raised Tucker with 3 other moms, and we all had firstborn boys, and between those 4 boys, we knew more about what teenage boys were doing than us mamas wanted to know. So yes, he would tell me about a lot of things. So we had that trust and that friendship where he can tell me, and we were working through stuff. And obviously working through like, okay, well, why are we taking these anxiety pills? And he did struggle with anxiety and just really kind of figuring out, what do I want to do? And school was not, public school model was hard for him. He really is a brilliant mind, a deep thinker. And I think when you I remember meeting with a counselor with him, and they said, Stefanie, sometimes square pegs can't be put in round holes. And, you know, Tucker was that boy who just was a deep thinker. And I think school was hard, like kind of took a lot of his gusto out of him. I don't think public schools are really made for teenage boys really well, honestly, but that's a different topic. But I will say we did walk through that journey and seeing that change in his behavior. And so I'll kind of go into the real sad part of the story was 2 days after his 19th birthday, I woke up and I heard a gurgling noise upstairs in my bedroom or in the media room. And it was early in the morning. And that did not sound like a normal noise. And I walked up and found him seconds away from death. Like his organs were shutting down. He was in a seizure state. I mean, it really was as close to a corpse as you could imagine. I could not even open his mouth to do CPR because it was like tensed up, like his organs were, it was bad. So that was where I called 911 and paramedics came and had given him Narcan. And that's when him and I were sitting in an ICU hospital room learning what illicit fentanyl was and learning that this is something 50 times stronger than heroin and you have a problem and we need to get a treatment center. And we couldn't even find a bed to take him because treatment centers were so overloaded with people. Now, mind you, this kid is insured and, you know, has covered in insurance. Think about those who don't have families who can provide that, don't have insurance, Texas being one of the states that does not have very good coverage, especially for kids. So we did find a bed in Houston, and so he was at treatment there. And then he got out, and he said, Mom, I'm still kind of struggling. I want to go back to another treatment. We found another treatment center for him, and he was there. So now he had been in recovery for 4 months, and he got out, and he was living his best life. He was working full-time, living on his own. And then as a mom, you're still trying to raise your kid. You're still trying to set boundaries. You're still like, you know, I had to say, like, you can't live in my home because I can't risk that your sisters can see something like that. You know, like you're still trying. But I didn't know that 80% of people relapse within 1 year of treatment. And I look at us like 2 treatment centers, $20,000 later, and I still was clueless as to really the impact that it has on the brain. So Tucker was training for a triathlon with his dad. And on the surface, looked like he was living his best life. Him and I went on a vacation together to visit some family in Vegas. Then he went on a trip with his dad. You know, really just as a mom, I felt like, ooh, we're finally out of that bad time. And it was a Wednesday night, a few days before his triathlon, and he had talked to me that he was feeling anxious that week. And so we were talking about some things, and I said, how can I support you? And he said, I just don't think I'm eating enough. So he came over, and I loaded him up with some food. I was the last person that he hugged, the last person he saw. And he left my house that day, loaded up with his healthy food that he needed to get ready to do this triathlon. And I remember kind of tearing up watching him walk away thinking, man, 6 months ago, I didn't even know if he was going to be alive. And now he's about to complete his first triathlon, and he's thriving. And unbeknownst to me, he had picked up a pill, and his roommate was out of town, and he hadn't been sleeping well, and he went home, and he took one more pill, and he never woke up. So that next morning, my last words to him were, I love you so much, I'm proud of you, and I'll see you tomorrow. And if you asked me if I would have been the parent who would have lost a child to fentanyl poisoning or to a drug, I would have told you, no way, not my kid. And when I talk to other parents, that's what they think. Because when you're raising your kids, you never think that's going to happen to my child. our job is to protect them and keep them safe and teach them about the dangers of life. And I didn't know anything about fentanyl. And then from there, I just told Tucker's story because the fentanyl crisis is really sneaky. Comes in, it muzzles people with guilt and shame, and they don't want to talk about it in judgment. People who think they understand, and they just don't know. You don't know until you're in it, and it's through stories and living authentically, telling my story and being honest about it so people can be like, wow, I can relate to that. I can be the mom who wanted to raise good kids to be successful, and now that's what I'm trying to do. So that means it could happen to me too, and it can happen to anyone. It doesn't discriminate.
For the 25, 35, 45-year-old cop out there, do you think that had you reached out to law enforcement as a partner to say, this is the situation that I'm in, because I'll be honest with you, being on the streets, so sometimes we get parents that call and say, my kid's acting bad. This wasn't a situation there with you. But do you think if you'd reached out to your local police department or sheriff's office and said, I need help, do you think you would have gotten the support that you needed then? And do you think it would have made a difference?
I do. Knowing what I know now, I work with Cedar Park Police a lot, and I see their heart in this matter, and they do understand it. I think people who put themselves in it to understand it better, and I'm sure you can see it differently as well. You show up with more compassion because you see how it's impacting people, and we really have to look at this crisis different than anything ever before, because it is different. Fentanyl is so different, and I'm sure, can you attest to that?
Yeah, so hindsight's 20/20, right? Yeah. So when this pandemic started happening in Hays County specifically, in 2022, I'd been off the streets for 6 years. I didn't even know what fentanyl was.
Me either.
Yeah. Right. And I talked to a lot of kids. I've probably done 300 plus presentations. One thing kids don't want to do is listen to a police officer stand there and talk to them.
Absolutely.
So I try to approach them, and then I let them in on a little secret. My brother is addicted to methamphetamines. So I start my presentation off with a picture of him when he got out of prison. He looked great, looked healthy. And then I show a current picture of him right now. Very obvious that he's gone back to methamphetamines. So I approach them not as a police officer, but as somebody who loves. I love and care about somebody who suffers from addiction. And I tell the kids that when I was in middle school, we knew who the druggies were, right? We knew that group. It's not like that anymore. And I remember being a kid and my parents saying, hey, when I was your age, I walked uphill in the snow to school both ways, and they had it so tough, right? And I tell the kids, I'm here to tell you that we have never experienced stress like you guys experience stress. Yeah. It's completely different. And so they deal with that in different ways. And that's, I think that's a big part of the issue is they're reaching out for something to deal with their anxieties and all that kind of stuff. There is no druggie group anymore.
Well, and to be completely transparent and honest, kudos to, excuse me, kudos to your at Hays County Command staff for recognizing when you got the call and identifying someone that could take the torch and lead it. Listen, we all know that you've got hammers out there, and what I mean by hammers, Steph, is you've got guys that when hell itself has surfaced in your jurisdiction and you need somebody to be there to be the thunder, call that guy. Mm-hmm. You're not going to call that guy to go give a death notification. Right. You're not going to call that guy to deal with a situation such as you were tasked with or to respond to a situation like that and show that compassion. Just being honest. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. But kudos to them for identifying you, and kudos to you for taking that torch and carrying it on and kind of starting off. Again, I'll say it. I mean, 5 years ago, we had no idea what fentanyl. We've got officers passing out. I mean, it hit us like a ton of bricks. And so now we have to evolve, and that's what law enforcement is evolving to the communities that you serve. And you guys have done that and continue to do that.
Yeah. Prior to 2022, an overdose was an EMS call. Mm-hmm. I mean, law enforcement wouldn't even show up. Yeah. Yep. And in this job, sometimes it's easy to become jaded, right? It's easy to write that off as, an addict or, then now, doing what I've done since 2022, the compassion has changed so much, and you realize that could be me getting that phone call from my brother.
Yeah.
You know, that is, and to see people like yourself, Stefanie, that is strong enough to stand there and tell the story, because that's what makes the difference.
Yeah.
Not a police officer, not a principal, not a teacher. It's hearing those stories.
Somebody that's gone through it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's astounding what you
Well,
guys are doing.
it is interesting, the stigma behind it, but also how people's responses are. So when Tucker first passed away, now, mind you, I had been in it for 9 months from start to finish. From first time he tried a pill to his death was 9 months. And I learned a lot during that time. And after he died, I just wanted to tell people. I wanted to warn others of the dangers. And when I did that, everyone started reaching out to me, and I was like, oh shit, we're in a problem, because there's a lot of people who are struggling, who are struggling silently. No one's talking about it. And I just wanted my school to talk about it. Like, let's warn the community that there's a problem here. I talked to law enforcement. They're getting calls right and left. And our school district, Leander ISD, they didn't want to do anything. They didn't want to talk about it. They wanted to say there's no problem here. And that really made me mad.
Well, pause real quick, because I think it's important to highlight this. At that moment in time, Leander ISD, I would make the argument that Leander ISD is most likely the largest, if not the second or third largest, compared to Round Rock or Georgetown in the Austin area. At that point in time, they weren't, and they were continuing to grow. Agreed?
Yeah.
And I think that identifying, we can't have that, Leander.
Yeah.
And you didn't want people to move in there. Mm-hmm. And so kudos to you for going, time out, this is bullshit, and we're going to call bullshit when it needs to be called out, and then taking the fight.
And then I'm on the front lines. I'm talking to law enforcement, and we're seeing what's happening in our community. So now law enforcement's also kind of like, hey, Leander, we do have a problem here. Students are dying, and they continue to die. And when a school's ego is bigger than the safety of my child, I have a problem.
Yeah.
And that was where the rubber hit the road, and I wasn't going to stop. So I took it up with the sheriff, Williamson County Sheriff at the time. I'm Sheriff Gleason then. And we started working together, and that was powerful. And then I also took it up with the lawmakers at the Capitol, and we were one of the first of 4 states to get an education law passed. And I think like that's the other part of the fentanyl crisis is recovery centers are having to figure it out. Law enforcement, in 2017, law enforcement was given Narcan. And it sat in your closets where you didn't know how to identify a fentanyl poisoning. And I know angel parents who have lost kids because law enforcement showed up on the scene
didn't
know what to do. They have Narcan in their pocket with no training. And that's where the state has failed us, because you're not getting the training on the front lines. And when the more I started working, and then I was getting invited to talk to law enforcement, I always thought, like, why am I talking to law enforcement? Certainly you guys know more, and no offense, but you don't, because you weren't given the training. Like, how can you possibly understand that? How can you really realize what's going on if you're not given that? And that's a broken system, if you ask me.
I could tell you a lot of departments in my area when I was still active is, everybody, Narcan was given to for free, right? But like you said, it'd be in a closet, and like, well, what is that? Oh, that's Narcan. Well, when are we going to get that issued? Oh, well, we're going to get training. But nobody ever went to that point of, hey, you know what? We got this. We're going to train next week.
Even more on top of that, in the police academy, I think we all can agree, we go through CPR training.
Yeah.
I can count on a handful of times how many times I've actually administered CPR. We've never had Narcan training.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
But we deal with addicts and people who deal with drugs every single day. Yeah. And that's the contrast that I'm trying to like, okay, well, there's a significant problem here. But it kind of goes back to the mental health crisis, which is this whole separate topic. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not, we in law enforcement have not done a good job of communicating to state lawmakers. These are problems. And I think that's where Tmpa and other organizations kind of come in, and we've done a better job over the last 15, 20 years of kind of communicating that to them. But training, we're always going to be for training. Always going to be for training. So. And
that's my commitment to y'all, is that's what my mission and my heartbeat is, working hand in hand with you guys and being at the Capitol to represent and saying, okay, what does this look like? Where can we help you? What needs what laws need to change? And so we did get the education law, House Bill 3908, Tucker's Law, passed in Texas, requiring fentanyl education for students. But that was, once again, the same thing that happened with y'all with Narcan. that's what happened with the education. It was an unfunded mandate. Schools are in a deficit, so they weren't able to bring in. So you get the law passed, but then what's next? How do we support the schools? And that's where the Tucker Project was birthed from, of let's get curriculum, let's train the teachers, because the same thing, teachers, how can they teach about fentanyl? They don't know.
They
the
don't
only
know about
people who know are the people on the front lines of this, and we have to start using our voices. And when I first started telling Tucker's story, a lot of people's story, or what parents were willing to say, was they took a pill one time and they didn't know. And that sounds much more sexy. You have a little more compassion when you're like, poor kid, he didn't know. But then when you find out, wait, he did know and he took it anyways, then it's kind of like, well, that's his bad, stupid kid. Like, stupid choices, stupid consequences. That's where the compassion has to change, and we have to understand the drug a little bit better, and then we can show up a little bit better in the world and have to start living more authentic.
You had mentioned something off camera about egos and jurisdictionals not communicating. Speaking of egos, we're fortunate in Hays County. Y'all do a really good job of communicating with Kyle, Buda, San Marcos PD. Talk about your experience with the defining line of jurisdictions and not communicating the overdoses.
Well, in Hays County, schools did a really good job allowing you guys the opportunity to come in. And that's the difference between what we're dealing with in Williamson County. Our schools are not letting anyone in. Not me, not law enforcement. They are not open.
Do they teach the sex ed?
I don't know.
Yeah, they do. They teach sex ed, but we're not going to talk about the fentanyl crisis. You know what I'm saying?
I think Hays County did a good job because they lost 5 students in a matter of a few weeks over the summer of 2022. At that point, how can you not? But obviously,
Leander was losing students too, and they just weren't talking about it.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because that's what kicked off the Sheriff Cutler at the time, identifying a need that his people needed to be educated on this and teach people.
Yeah. So that summer happened, 2022. I'm doing my outreach stuff, Citizens Academy, Junior Deputy Academy, all the fun stuff, right? And Sheriff Cutler called myself up and said, we've lost 5 students. We have got to do something. Yeah. So you go learn everything you can possibly learn about fentanyl and tell as many people as you can. That became my job. Mm-hmm. And we had a joint press conference with Kyle and Buda Police Department. We'd made a recent arrest, and that's that's not common for law enforcement to do with a drug overdose either. No, and that's like I said before, it was just an EMS call, and now immediately we're taking phones. We're doing, we kind of know more about what it might be, but we started with that press conference. I met with another mother that lost her son, and Janelle Rodriguez with the Forever 15 Project, and we travel around and tell everything we can. I'm a layperson. Like, I don't know much about it. All I know is to go tell people the facts about fentanyl. And this is what it is. And talk about, family issues. And I'm a parent. I have 2 daughters that I'm not so good to say that it couldn't happen to me. It can. Mm-hmm. And I'm scared to death as a dad, as a parent. And we don't get owner's manuals when we have children. No. Like, you learn all this on your own, and you were talking about the change of, showing signs of depression or something. Yeah. A lot of parents, that's easy to chalk up to puberty, or it's, their lifestyle changes or whatever.
Bullying or,
and being able to pay attention to that and understand that, okay, well, that's not normal. You don't know that, until you know that. Yeah. So parenting is very difficult.
Yeah. Can I kind of explain a little bit of like how I got into learning about the drug dealers?
Yeah.
I think this is I've not gone into detail with this, but it's different talking to law enforcement because you guys understand this. But kind of backstory, I didn't tell you guys this part off camera, but Tucker's First Treatment Center, he wouldn't tell me I want to know, who'd you get the pill from? Like, who's giving you these pills?
Yeah, crazy mama doesn't find out. He's afraid you're going to get on them.
And I was working with law enforcement. They wanted to know. I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out. But I will say what I did was like, no, I'm not going to give you my kid's phone. It feels a little weird. I don't want him in trouble, right? Like, and this is just being real. So that was, I live right on the edge of Leander and Cedar Park. My front yard's in Leander, my backyard's in Cedar Park. So really I'm right in the middle of Williamson and Travis County, or right on the edge of the line there.
Yeah.
But I will say, so this was March 13th of 2021, and my dates, I'm not going to go into details, but that was the first time Tucker had a fentanyl poisoning when I called 911, and Leander PD showed up. Well, fast forward, he goes to the hospital. I'm trying to get who's selling you these pills. Well, 2 weeks after, Tucker's in treatment, and he calls me, and he said, Mom, I don't want to tell you who was giving me those pills, but he's really messed up. He's posting these pills he's selling on social media, and then he's at his friend's funeral, and he said, rest in peace. And the very next picture are the pills he has for sale. So I told him he's advertising his pills for something they're not, and they're killing people, and it almost killed me. So Tucker had that, dude,
guilt, yeah.
You told me there was Xanax, they're not Xanax, and now you're at a friend's funeral. I almost died 2 weeks ago, and this is really messed up. And so he said, I'll tell you his Snapchat. And I was like, call Leander. This is his Snapchat. This is what my son said. Well, what I didn't realize is the kid who died. So fast forward to June, and I see a lady do a news story. And Becky Stewart, she did a news story talking about her son's death in March. So I reach out to her, my son is struggling with fentanyl addiction, and your son died. Let's meet up. So I took her to lunch, and she's telling me the story, and she's telling me the dates of what kind of happened in Cameron's life that led up to his death. And I remember pulling out my phone and looking at the calendar, and I was like, was Juan Soria at your son's funeral? And she's like, I don't know. And she went and asked a family if this kid was, we found a picture of him, and they were like, yeah, I remember seeing him. So this was a situation where within a span of a week or two, we had a 19-year-old dead and a 19-year-old overdose within a mile of each other. And those departments didn't communicate with that. So I start following Juan on social media, and I'm watching him appalled, holy crap, this is a 19-year-old kid who's selling all kinds of drugs. He's got guns and money and posted up in Leander, hit me up, doing good numbers. He'd post feds are on my ass and I'm still getting paid, things like this. And so I'm sending all of this to my law enforcement, pictures of this is what's going on. So this is Leander that I'm working with. This is just the start of it. Leander really wasn't working these cases, but Cedar Park had kind of been aware of what was happening. So when I showed up at the front of Tucker's house, knowing that my son was dead inside, I remember screaming to those law enforcement, go get him. This is where he lives. Why can't you get him off the street? And I just remember being so mad. And in Cedar Park, they were in Arizona working a case that they had tracked back to Arizona at that time. And that was kind of when they were like, we gotta get this. We gotta get this. Yep. And they did an amazing job, and he was arrested 6 months later, and they did charge him federally. And he was linked back to the death of Cameron Stewart, but they weren't able to get charges on him just because time and things had happened. And then 2 months after that, he had given pills to someone that resulted in an overdose of a 17-year-old. So the point being that these drug dealers are going to continue to sell. We don't have people run around with machine guns shooting people. And so we can't just discount it oh, that's another drug addict. We're not going to not work these cases. And I really appreciate working with Cedar Park. And then since then, we've expanded. And so I go on the death scene and I support the parents and help law enforcement be that liaison. Because I remember when I showed up, they looked at me I don't know what to do with this lady. And I was rolling around on the ground. You guys aren't trained to handle a parent who is in that state. No offense. And I mean, nor should you. Your job is to go figure out how do we get these drugs off the street. So that's where I try to help out with Texas Against Fentanyl and supporting law enforcement and really just working together, being on the front lines of this and trying to come up with solutions and get the training where training is due and continue to try to fight this crisis head on. And if we can't identify where the problem is, then we can't find a solution. So
are you guys going through establishing different regional representatives for your project?
Yeah. So Texas Against Fentanyl has 5 directors throughout the state. So when we first started, we were focused on education, legislation, supporting angel families who have lost. And then it's kind of shifted. Other states got interested in the Tucker Project, which is our cross-curricular curriculum. And they didn't want Texas Against Fentanyl curriculum. So we pulled the Tucker Project off from Texas Against Fentanyl. So that's our education part. And we're working in a total of 15 states right now in some form or fashion, getting the Tucker Project in, as well as passing laws in those states to support it. And then now Texas Against Fentanyl has kind of evolved where we really try to support angel families who have lost and drive change that way. What Mad Moms did is they got mad and they organized and they assembled and they're able to drive change because they're voting. And that's what my goal with Texas Against Fentanyl is. Let's all band together. Let's let our politicians and lawmakers know. Let's let the comptroller's office, who is in charge of all of the opioid settlement money, know that we're pissed off and we're following this, and where are you giving the money, and let's give it to the right places to drive change. And when we can do that right, then our voice has more power. And so we can support what you guys are doing, and we can go to the Capitol and we can testify on behalf. That's what Mad Moms, people showed up, they testified, and they drove drunk driving charges totally different. You know, even when in my childhood, police officers would pull someone over drunk and follow them home, or they would go home. That has changed, and that's what we have to do on the fentanyl crisis. And that is my mission and what I want to spearhead and continue to do. And
we and Joey were in the Valley 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
We were down there, and Mark, I was telling you this. Hidalgo County's DA's office has started a task force. Pretty cool office. It's in like an old El Chapo type house. But I was negligent. I didn't know. I think fentanyl, it's a pill, right? And I think some of the Hays County cases or the THC didn't know this. The stuff coming across the border are now THC vapes, and the fentanyl's being laced inside in the vapes. And what was really irritating to me is the DA investigator we were talking to was showing me and Joey and some of the evidence that they had come across, and it was all targeted for kids. Yeah. It was Fruit Loops, Fruity Pebbles, packaged for kids, and that's what's the scary thing. As a dad, it's just getting worse and worse. They started off with 1 gram. Now then they went to 2 grams, and now they're at 3 grams. And I think 1 gram of one of those THC vapes get like 800 puffs. So you're looking at 2,400 puffs off one little vape pen. Jeez. And they're coming across.
I'm heading to a school next week. That kid was on the bus at a sporting event, hit a vape, and had to be given Narcan. That's the reality of this is what's happening.
And I'll be honest, when I was on the street, I didn't really fool with the THC vape pens. Because I looked at it like this is just a Class C marijuana. I'm not going to pull out. You have to think. Right now in law enforcement, the retention and recruitment crisis is also going on. So you have officers that they're a little seasoned, that aren't I call them the Class C Nazis, the one that, they every time that somebody messes up, we take them to jail for a little Class C warrant. Guys that are a little bit seasoned look at it like, I'm not going to waste my time on an arrest for a minor offense like this when I can just send them a ticket and go on and keep the evidence, right? And I look back and, man, what a mistake on my part. What a huge mistake on my part.
Talking about vapes and the fact that now those vapes are containing fentanyl, 60% of kids in school vape.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the largest, most used thing by kids. Now, they may not take opioids. They might not take, oxys and the Xanaxes and stuff, but they are vaping 60%.
And the sad part about it, from that interview that we had, that it's hitting the elementaries.
Yeah.
And vaping crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's one of the few things that can cross that barrier. And if we're talking about brain development, THC concentrate is higher than ever before. Yep. Used to be 2 to 4%. Now it's anywhere 80 to 100% if it's dab. And you have kids that have access to THC. And now what they're finding, studies are showing that THC impacts the prefrontal cortex. Back to what I was talking about, the ability to make decisions. So you have children who have access to THC that's impacting their brain's ability to make decisions on an adolescent brain. Yeah. And they're more inclined to try other things, to do other things. It's a downward spiral, and our kids' parents don't know about it. Our kids don't know about it. Law enforcement doesn't know about it. I mean, this is sometimes it can be overwhelming, and it feels like the more I learn, the more I'm just like, shit, like we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I just have to believe that the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. and we're just going to keep on tackling it, and we're going to keep talking about it, and we're going to keep using our voice.
Yeah. Well, speaking of one bite at a time, Mark, you want to dive off into kind of, we heard about what you guys were doing in 2022 leading up to 2024. Kind of what's the mission now setting forward of kind of where this program is going to be, and maybe what some objectives that the new sheriff has kind of set forward of education, not only the kids, but the general public.
I'm fortunate that our new sheriff, Anthony Hippolito, was my partner for a couple of years before, and he and I were the two that traveled around and talked about this.
Globally,
yeah. We went to Mexico City, so we decided to call ourselves
I guess I should say international.
Yes, internationally.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Listen to Joe Rogan the other day.
So I'm very lucky that he's now leading us and has handed me the opportunity to continue doing what I'm doing. We kind of have a two-prong approach, right? One part of that is education. The other part is enforcement, because you can't let either one of them go. Mm-hmm. So I really don't have any idea what our enforcement side does. I don't want to cross the two, right? I specifically stay on education. That's my forte is to talk to kids and share my family history and have Janelle share hers or whoever I'm with. And that's what I want to keep doing. Obviously, Hays County is my priority. That's who pays my paycheck. But we haven't said no to anybody yet. And I got involved with Tall Cop Says Stop. So if you know those guys, we get to speak at their conferences. And my passion is telling people about fentanyl. I love to do that more than anything. It's my favorite job I've ever had in my life, and it's not a fun topic.
Yeah,
but
it's an ugly topic.
It's an ugly topic. But when we finish a presentation, and there is a line of kids to talk to an angel parent or somebody who's been through that, it is eye-opening. It's mind-blowing because the kids are not talking to anyone else other than their peers.
Yeah,
they're not telling their parents. They're not telling a counselor. They're telling each other. Yeah. And, a big thing I want to mention before we get too far, you mentioned social media. When I do parent presentations, I tell them that if you pay your kid's cell phone bill, that is not your kid's cell phone. That's your cell phone. And if you knew things like Telegram are out there,
Signal,
what they're doing on Signal and Roblox and Snapchat, I can open Telegram right now and find anything you want to find within 4 minutes from here.
Delivered
instantly.
Yep.
And if parents saw that, it would blow your mind. Mm-hmm. So if your child has a cell phone, 100% of everything illegal is bought and sold through social media.
Yep. Yeah.
All of it. Mm-hmm. And if your kids have a cell phone, you need to know what's on it and how they communicate. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important. So we're going to keep doing what we've been doing. Our enforcement's going to keep doing their enforcement. We've got a couple manslaughter charges through the DA's office now, some homicide charges. So I'm sure our enforcement's great. They're going to keep doing it. And I'm going to keep educating as much as I'm allowed to do it.
And that's what's so frustrating is that, back to your point about, I guarantee you that Leander or Cedar Park, they probably knew who the drug dealer was. It's just building that case. And I listen, I get it. I'm a cop, but now I'm a private citizen, so I get the fact that we have civil rights that obviously law enforcement can't violate. But it just seems like the more red tape that lawmakers in D.C. and Texas, the more red tape that they put on, securing a search warrant and the parameters because of mistakes that have been made in the past, it prolongs our ability to have that enforcement and save lives. So it's frustrating.
If there is something that you guys see that you're dealing with that can help you work better, a law that needs change, I encourage you to please reach out. We have a political consultant that we work with Texas Against Fentanyl, Jennifer Stevens. She's our educational political consultant. She's a lobbyist, and we're committed to driving change. And one of the laws, when House Bill 4, the murder law, got passed, the only thing listed in that is fentanyl. And so one of our missions this legislative session is we need to add in cocaine and meth, because having these cases where parents are lost their child and maybe it doesn't come back fentanyl, it's cocaine or it's meth, and the parent is like, so that's a murder charge, right? No, it's not, because it's not fentanyl. So we have to kind of like, the
bill needs to be cleaned up a little bit.
We have some bills, and then House Bill 1319, the OD mapping bill. If law enforcement doesn't sign up to do that, then we can't track that, and so like that's
a good resource. Yeah.
Yeah. So we work with a lot of people on a lot of laws.
This is a personal question, but I think it's important for the listener or viewer out there to hear your response to it. Do you think that if by chance law enforcement would have come across Tucker before his death and been in possession of the Xanax, and enforcement been taken against him legally, do you think that it would have changed the outcome, or do you think it would have spiraled him more downward into the downward path?
I have thought about that, and I would say that the legal system, if you're looking at jail and support and mental health, all of that, and then not understanding fentanyl addiction, I don't know that would have saved him. That's just the reality of it. We have to support after. And if we can't fully understand what that addiction looks like, what's that community? I work with Dan Hobson with Rise Recovery, and one thing that they do so well is having a support of those who are in active recovery, working together and supporting each other. But you know what? The network that doesn't have groups of people are teenagers. Teenagers don't have that support of how do we find that peer-based group where we can grow together. And when you were talking about the responses at schools and the lines of people around, so when I end my presentation, I always tell them I'll be at the door, like I give fist bumps, high fives, hugs, whatever you want. And they're all hugging me, like they're talking. And so many kids are saying, I lost my parent. I know my uncle died. I lost my brother. I got a message, this little girl found me, and she said, I haven't talked to my aunt in 5 years because she was a drug addict. And after talking to you, I reached out to her today, and she said she's trying to get help. This was a family who quit talking to a family member for 5 years because of her drug use.
Hey, listen, we're cops. We're guilty of it too.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it. And I think moving down to Hays County and being in Wimberley from East Texas, I think it was just it's an eye-opening experience when you take off the badge, because you look at all the missed opportunities that you had. The reason I ask you that question is typically, like any profession, you have the 21 to 32-year-old, I'll say 1 to 5 years experience as a cop. Okay. They're the go-getters, right? They don't look at the after effects of, man, putting this kid, 17, 18-year-old kid in jail for Xanax, is it really going to, not what good is it going to do? How is it going to impact him?
Yeah.
Now he's got to deal with it. We want to help people. That's what we signed up to do. And I think now, as I'm older and a dad, I look at the after effects of, okay, if we truly want change, if we truly want to change this individual's life, is this the best option?
Right.
And I think that we as a law enforcement, having those situations where we can make a difference, stop and think, and not rush into just book them and cuff them and stuff them.
Right.
So it's just I wanted to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So I think it is case by case situation. If you take the teenage drug dealer that was selling the pills to my son and the other ones who had died, he's taking 25 pills a day, and he's a wrecking ball. Like, he's selling pills faster than ever. I met a girl recently. She was 19. She's been in recovery for over a year. She's telling me her story. And when I mentioned the drug dealer who sold to Tucker, she was like, wait, that's the first person who gave me a pill when I was 14. So, it's weird how it's that one person can be a spider web to so many. And, that's hard in law enforcement identifying. I imagine, I can't act like I'm a cop because I'm not, but I could imagine, where do we say this person needs to be taken off the streets and this person just doesn't know? And then what's the support and follow up with that? I wish I knew a solution or what that is, and I don't.
I agree. There isn't a solution. It's hard to determine who needs to go, who needs this type of help.
Right.
I'll tell you, as far as after action goes, my brother did 4 years of an 8-year sentence. When he got out, he was super gung-ho. Obviously, he'd been without he was fully recovered. You know, he's been without it for 4 years. But it was his friend group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, he called his old buddies and he's like, I would tell him, you can't talk to them. Mm-hmm. They're fine. They're changed. They're doing this and they're doing that. And it was instant, just instant going back to that his peer group.
And like with Tucker, that wasn't his peer group. Those weren't the kids he ran with. And he was isolated. He didn't have, people who understood to support. And I think he really was down on himself. Like, why can't
I shake this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that just goes to show that there's not answers. I mean, my brother is older, he's in our age group. So
easy. Whoa.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting up there.
The gray hairs are poking out.
Group.
Yeah. But our teenagers, like I said, they're not in the druggie group.
Right.
No.
That's not the peer group. I mean, these kids are smart. They are, they're bookworms. They're, getting good grades. They're athletes. They're all of these things that it's a loss for answers.
I'm going to speak on behalf of all of our angel families with Texas Against Fentanyl. So many of us have almost the same kid. When you listen to them describe their kid, they say they love nature. They loved others. They were super empathetic. They, it's wild. And I'm like, man, we all have these like brilliant, they're super smart. You hear that a lot. They're really smart. And some of the most smartest, wildest people who have the most brilliant ideas are people who do struggle. It is true. But I'm like, man, you see all these bright lights in this world that are taken out. I was just in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration, and I went to the DEA museum. And it's just lined with faces where you have to type in your kid's name on a computer screen, and they'll tell you wall 8, line, like row B, line 2. This is you're finding your kid on a wall that there's so many people that you have to type in on a computer screen to even find them. And now there's not enough room for them to be displayed anymore. To think that we lose a whole, and these are some stats that people, I don't know if you don't know, you need to know, but every single week in America, since 2021, I believe, it might have been 2022, we're losing a whole classroom of adolescents ages 14 to 18. That's comparable to a Uvalde school shooting happening every single week in America. And go back to what I said about 80% of people relapsing. What about that statistic? How many more kids are using that? Maybe they drop out of school. Maybe, they die like Tucker right the year after he gets out of school.
But it goes back to that stigma of I'll speak on personal experience. We had a situation in the little community that I live in where a young man made the comment about, and I'm talking about society, I'm not talking about law enforcement. He made a comment about a firearm at the local school. Of course, the school district had to do their part to protect, other students. But there were some parents within our little football group that were going to turn their back on this kid. And I say that for this reason. It made me stop and think, like, man, they're kids. They don't realize the seriousness of some things they say. Imagine they don't imagine the seriousness of taking a pill, right?
Yeah.
And so they were going to kick him out of this football program. And I was like, guys, if you kick him out of the football program, you're taking his everything, right? And so it made me stop and think and go, wait a minute, there's a better way to handle this. And that was his support, his teammates. Even some of his teammates were going to turn their back on him. And so it just made me stop and realize, man, you can't be so judgmental so quickly. And so, they say you get wiser with age, and I guess it's somewhat true.
It is true. I love your empathy. That's a really good skill. It's a gift, I think, and I think we all need to lean in with a little more grace and empathy and understand each other. And when we do that, we can show up better for one another.
Well, that's what this world needs, a little more grace.
Yeah,
so
for
sure.
Sure.
Did we hit everything?
I think so. I mean, we're all going to keep doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
I think a big takeaway from this is especially for those younger officers that, come out and their goal is to kick ass and take names, right? We all were there. It's just to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Have a little compassion and understand that these kids may not necessarily be your trouble causer. They just need a little help, hand up.
That's right.
and just having that compassion for our communities. I think that'll go a long way with some of the stigma that law enforcement has, or we've suffered over the last couple of years, is being a little bit more compassionate. So
I also think that some of this, this is great information for me. Me and Tyler, we're not active anymore. We're not on the streets, but we get to talk to law enforcement all across the state. Is the other thing too is like a young officer, they want to go to the schools, all the cool classes, right? The firearms and this and the tactics and roll around and do kung fu and the whole 9 yards. And but I think this is for everybody out there, even for legislation or lawmakers and people that are out there. Is we need to have a little bit more education and training on stuff like this. Because if you start off the officer by training them at in their first beginning of their career, then they can become what you are now, not taking 15, 20 years down the road to become.
I think it's coming. I think we're, as police academies go, they're evolving, right?
Yeah.
So when I was in the academy, we didn't have to take a mental health class.
No.
But it's required now. We didn't have to take, hearing impaired class or whatever it was. So it's headed in the right direction. It's evolving. I remember when the police academy was 160 hours to get TCOL certified, and now we're up to 800 and something, or
now almost 9.
Yeah. So we're headed that direction. But when you're in the police academy, all that stuff is mandatory.
Right.
Like it kind of takes away from what you're learning. I think offering classes and getting our officers in these classes and making it something they want to hear and understand is an obstacle.
And I do that. I do work with officers, and we do TCOL trainings where I'm a part of that and share my story and stuff. So anyone who is interested in that, happy to reach out. I spoke at the Tmpa banquet in Galveston in August, and I had some law enforcement connects. So we're working in schools with law enforcement there, where we bring in the angel families and get that partnership going. So that's really kind of what we've done with Texas Against Fentanyl, is try to buddy up with law enforcement and leverage that and bring in what you guys are doing and the personal stories in that area, in that community. Because Tucker's story in Leander is much more powerful than in Georgia. In Georgia, I want a Georgia angel family who's going to go in. With the Tucker Project, we're running through the Texas Education Agency a pilot right now in Texas, and that's been going good. So we're excited about that.
So we're gonna put all your information on the podcast when this is pushed out for people that need help. We'll put your email address. I know that you're a busy man too with all the stuff you do across Hays County. So I can't thank y'all enough for coming in. I hope that this has been beneficial for y'all. I know it's been damn sure beneficial for me and Joey, and I hope the viewer and listener enjoys this episode. It's going to be great.
Well, awesome. Thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to work with you guys and continue to save lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd love to come back.
Yeah, man.
Anytime,
you got an open
anytime.
seat,
Let's
Mark.
keep talking.
I was going to say,
Anytime you want. Yeah.
are you willing to come back?
Yeah. Listen,
we weren't that bad, were we?
We always end each podcast show with 3 rapid fire questions. And since you haven't watched the show, I'm kind of glad that you didn't, because you can't cheat. Yeah. So, what's your favorite cop car? What's your favorite cop movie? And what's your favorite drink of choice whenever you're off the clock? And I know you've never driven a cop car, but what's your favorite cop car that you like seeing go down the highway?
I don't know.
We'll start with you. So you don't know your favorite cop car ever. It could be a Corvette, Mustang, Crown Vic,
Lamborghini.
Lamborghini. You like that?
California.
What's your favorite cop movie you've ever watched? Or a line from a cop movie?
Don't have one.
You don't have one? What about your favorite drink of choice when you're relaxing?
Ben's probably bourbon.
Bourbon? Yeah, I got you. Mark?
Man, when I started, I had a Caprice, the
Shamu.
Shamu.
Me too.
Yeah.
The Shamu.
Shamu, and then
Shamu. I know what car you're talking
yeah.
about.
Obviously, everybody loves the Ford Crown Vic. I got a brand new one in 2003 and wrecked it 2 weeks after I got it. So it's been a progression, right? So now today, I'm 6'5", 280 pounds.
Tahoe.
So Tahoe, I love, and I'm right now driving an F-150, which I think is
awesome.
Okay,
amazing.
I'll say that. I dig the trucks. I dig the
I
police
love
trucks.
it.
Yes.
It's been my favorite.
The V8.
I have
the
a twin
six-
turbo V6, so
Okay.
it's pretty snappy.
We'll have to talk to Anthony about him manning up and go ahead and getting that V8 because it's worth it.
I asked for a 250. But I don't want to go that far.
Shuttle with the V6. That's fine.
So-
What's your favorite cop movie?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm a comedy guy, so Blue Streak was really, really funny. Bad Boys was good.
The other guys?
Yeah, all those. Police Academy was good. I don't know that I have a favorite cop movie.
They're all good.
They're all good.
Yeah. Your favorite drink of choice when you're relaxing?
A classic Chilton, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is.
And what is
That's
that?
how classy I am.
Yes.
It's simple. It's vodka, soda, and lemon juice with a salted rim.
Glass
Very
with class.
crispy.
Did you name it that? Where'd that name come
No,
from? Chilton.
I saw somebody order one, and I was like, I want to try that. It's called a Chilton's. I think it was born around Lubbock somewhere. So, but it's been around a long time, and it's
I'm going to have to check on that.
yeah, you get you a Chilton. It's good.
may get
My
that for
wife
lunch.
calls it dirty beach water, but it's good.
Hey,
Well-
it's the job done.
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
And I just want to say on behalf of the Angel families, like these are loved ones who, these are parents who have lost their children. So those who work with us in this and take care of these cases and help to bring our hearts some closure and peace. Thank you on behalf of all of those who have lost. I want to represent my network in that space, and just we are grateful for our law enforcement. And there's nothing more painful than having my Angel parents call and say, man, it's been 15 months and they won't return my call and I don't know what's going on. That's hard.
Yeah.
So thank you for those who are taking these cases seriously and working with our families.
Yeah, for sure. Joey,
Sir?
what's we cover everything you wanted to cover today?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could stay here for another hour.
I know we got to get out of here because you've got tea time here in a couple hours.
Yeah.
By
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Conus Heights Mayor. I know
Lord
you've been
God,
pretty
yeah.
tight.
Oh, absolutely.
Listen.
And you got to eat.
Yeah, we got to eat.
Did I mention I'm 6'5",
we gotta
280?
feed- we gotta feed
it's about time to
Gigantor.
eat, Yeah.
I appreciate you guys tuning in. You guys stay safe. Our hearts and our hearts and prayers are out with the Keller Public Safety. We had a officer suicide this week. Mental illness is a real thing. It takes a phone call. If you guys are struggling out there, we're going to leave information. 1-800-COP-LINE is a resource, and feel free to reach out to me, Tyler Owen, 903-926-4005. There is help. You guys take care, stay safe. God bless you, and as always, may God bless Texas.
God bless Texas.